Hollywood went big in the 1960s. Bigger stars, bigger budgets, and even bigger disasters. These films were meant to dominate theaters, not vanish into obscurity. But they crashed hard. One became the decade's most spectacular musical misfire. Another got banned in China. From brutal POW camps to surreal suburban nightmares, here are 10 forgotten 60s flops that hold up better than anyone expected. Star is the decade's most spectacular musical misfire. It's what happens when a studio tries to chase another sound of music and misses by a mile. You get Julie Andrews singing her heart out as Gertrude Lawrence, with Robert Wise throwing every bit of budget on screen. Huge dance numbers, wild costumes, and even a few animation tricks. Fox wanted a hit so badly they hyped it to the moon. Sure, this was the next big thing. But in '68, nobody was in the mood. Musicals were out, counterculture was in, and 3 hours of old-school showbiz just felt out of touch. The movie tanked hard, lost millions, and Fox never really recovered. It became shorthand in Hollywood for what happens when you spend big and the audience walks away. Still, if you look past the box office numbers, there's a lot to see. The staging is huge, the songs are catchy, and Julie Andrews gives it everything she's got. For fans of big musicals, or anyone who just wants to see what real excess looks like on screen, Star is worth a spin. It's not perfect, way too long, definitely of its time, but it's got style. Sometimes a legendary flop is more interesting than a safe hit. King Rat isn't your standard World War II movie. You're dropped into a brutal POW camp in Singapore where nobody's handing out medals. George Segal plays King, a guy who survives by outsmarting, out-hustling, and sometimes out-cheating everyone around him. The guards are vicious, the prisoners desperate, and there's not a single noble speech in sight. Denholm Elliott, who'd actually been a POW, brings a real edge to his role. And the whole film feels honest in a way most war movies never dare. When King Rat came out, it was just too grim for the times. Audiences in the mid-60s still wanted war heroes and victory parades. What they got was a story where survival is dirty and everyone's just trying to make it to the next day. The studio didn't know how to market it, so they just called it another war picture, and it disappeared fast. The movie didn't make much money, and for a while, it barely got mentioned. But if you watch it now, King Rat stands out for all the reasons it flopped. It's sharp, unromantic, and refuses to sugarcoat anything. For anyone who wants a real look at the cost of survival, this one holds up. Major Dundee. Peckinpah wanted a bloody, sprawling Civil War Western, something different from the usual hero story. What he got was a set full of arguments, rewrites, and blown deadlines. Charlton Heston even threatened him with a sword to keep things moving. The studio watched costs skyrocket, then took the movie away and hacked it down in the editing room. What ended up in theaters felt messy, rushed, and only half finished. Audiences didn't bite. The plot jumps, the tone shifts, and there's this sense the whole thing barely held together. For years, it sat in the shadow of other westerns, with most people chalking it up as another expensive misfire. Peckinpah called it the worst experience of his career. But here's the thing. If you see the restored cut, you get a whole new movie. That old roughness becomes a strength. The conflicts, the muddy alliances, the bleak tone, it's all there, and it hits different than your usual cowboy flick. Major Dundee is still uneven, but it's got a bite and an edge most studio westerns never dared. If you want something that doesn't play it safe, this one's worth tracking down. 55 Days at Peking goes all in on spectacle. You've got Charlton Heston trying to hold the line, Ava Gardner chewing up the scenery, and David Niven adding class, right in the middle of recreation of the Boxer Rebellion that cost millions. They built an entire Chinese city in Spain just to tear it apart on camera. The set was so big it became its own tourist attraction. But making a giant movie doesn't guarantee anyone will show up. The production was chaos. Fights between stars. A director who collapsed from exhaustion, and producer Samuel Bronston, who wound up banned from Hollywood after the financial disaster. The studio kept pouring in money, hoping for a hit, but by the time it opened, audiences had moved on. The subject, a long-forgotten uprising in turn-of-the-century China, didn't help draw crowds. Even China banned the movie. The market was flooded with big epics, and this one got lost in the noise. The movie flopped hard. Still, if you put it on today, there's no denying the ambition. The battles are massive, the sets are wild, and you just don't see this kind of physical scale anymore. Good luck catching this one on TV. 55 Days at Peking rarely turns up these days, which only adds to its cult reputation. It's a mess, but it's a fascinating one, worth a watch if you're curious about what happens when studios swing for the fences. 55 Days at Peking is flawed, but the spectacle still holds up. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to VintageVerse for more lost classics and wild Hollywood stories. A war movie that actually feels dangerous. The train delivers. Every wreck you see, every explosion, it's the real deal. Burt Lancaster did his own stunts, tore up his knee, and just kept going. The production? Total chaos. The French rail company let them destroy working tracks, and director John Frankenheimer shot it all for real. No models. They just wrecked trains. When the train hit theaters in 1964, nobody showed up. Critics brushed it off as another war flick. Audiences wanted big names and even bigger heroes. Instead, they got a dirty, tense, black and white movie about French resistance fighters trying to keep art out of Nazi hands. It was loud, rough, and didn't have a neat ending. The box office didn't care. But you watch it now, and it's obvious. This is one of the greatest action movies ever made. Real danger, real stakes, and every set piece actually happened in front of the camera. No CGI, no tricks, just guts and grit. People caught up eventually. Directors and stunt crews call it a masterclass. For something real, put on the train. It may have flopped, but it's the real deal. Play Dirty is a different kind of war film. You get Michael Caine dropped into the desert with a squad that looks more like a crew of criminals than soldiers. The job is ugly, a sabotage run nobody expects to come back from. Trust goes out the window quick. Every man has his own angle, and it's clear from the start that survival beats loyalty every time. Director Andre de Toth keeps things blunt. No one is polished. There's no hero shot waiting at the end. Audiences in 1969 were not ready for this kind of war story. They came looking for heroes, maybe a little old-school adventure. Instead, they got something mean and stripped down with violence that makes you wince. Critics wrote it off as too bleak, and the studio tried to pass it off as standard action. Nobody bought it, and the movie sank without a trace. Years later, Martin Scorsese called Play Dirty one of the best anti-war movies around. He's got a point. It's raw, cold, and honest about what war does to people. If you want a war film that goes for the throat, this one still delivers. The Bridge at Remagen is one of those movies where the behind-the-scenes story is just as wild as what's on screen. You're dropped into the final days of World War II. George Segal leads a squad of tired American soldiers racing the Germans to capture a bridge that could end the war faster. The action is tight, the tension is real, and nobody comes out looking like a hero. But here's where it gets crazy. The production shot in Czechoslovakia just as Soviet tanks rolled into Prague. The crew had to drop everything and run for the border. Scenes went unfinished. Segal nearly walked away from acting, and the movie barely made it across the finish line. By the time it hit theaters, audiences were burned out on war films and barely noticed. The box office was brutal. Remagen slipped through the cracks. But if you catch it now, you'll find a movie that's lean, fast, and rough around the edges in a good way. The chaos of the production actually adds to the atmosphere. No glory, just a tough look at men pushed to the edge. For war movie fans who want something real, The Bridge at Remagen holds up better than most. The Night of the Generals throws you into a story most studios wouldn't touch. It's World War II, but you're not getting another battle epic. This one's a murder mystery with Nazi generals as suspects. You've got Peter O'Toole at his iciest, Omar Sharif digging for the truth, and Donald Pleasance lurking in every shadow. The plot? Complicated. There's double-crossing, cover-ups, and nobody you can really trust. The film jumps between occupied Warsaw and Paris, and you never really know who's on which side. When this movie hit theaters, people didn't know what to make of it. Audiences expected a straight war story or maybe a classic whodunit, not a mix of both. The pacing is strange, the tone shifts, and the runtime drags in spots. The studio didn't do it any favors either. They sold it as a thriller, but it landed as something much stranger. The result? The Night of the Generals flopped. Critics were confused, and most viewers checked out early. Looking at it now, you see how bold it actually was. The visuals are sharp, and a few set pieces still pack a punch, even now. It's a genuine original. Flawed, sure, but you can't ignore it. For anyone tired of predictable war films, this one still stands out. Petulia is the kind of movie that throws you off from the start. You're in San Francisco, late 60s, but it's not the summer of love, it's the morning after. Julie Christie is restless, George C. Scott is lost, and everyone seems to be running from something. Richard Lester jumps between timelines, flashes back, flashes forward, and cuts quick, almost like he's daring you to keep up. The story is about broken people who can't quite connect, and the film never lets you get comfortable. When it opened, nobody really knew what to make of it. The editing was too sharp, the emotions too raw, and audiences just weren't ready for a movie this jagged. The studio barely pushed it. Petulia flopped hard, got buried under all the bigger, flashier movies of '68. But if you look back now, you'll see a film that's way ahead of its time. The music, the look, the sense of disconnection, it's all there before the '70s even start. So is it good? Absolutely. It's not an easy watch, but it's honest, and it hits. If you want to see where modern character drama started, Petulia is a movie that still holds up. Over time, directors who shaped the '70s, like Altman and Scorsese, pointed back to movies like Petulia for inspiration. It didn't change the game at the box office, but it quietly set the stage for what came next. The fall of the Roman Empire, Hollywood betting everything on size. Samuel Bronston built a real city in Spain, dragged in half of Europe as extras, and poured $19 million into a story about power and decline. The set made actual Roman ruins look small. Alec Guinness, Sophia Loren, and Christopher Plummer. Classic studio casting, everyone playing politics and backstabbing in togas. But when it opened, it missed the mark. Audiences had already seen enough sword and sandal movies. Ben-Hur, Spartacus, they were tired. It ran 3 hours, heavy on speeches, and you could see money leaking from every frame. By the end, Bronston's studio was done. Epic flop wasn't an exaggeration. The box office was brutal. Heads rolled. Hollywood pulled back from these massive productions for years. If you stick with it, though, you get The Chariot Duel, still one of the most incredible ever shot. Decades later, the ambition is hard to miss, and the scale still dwarfs most modern blockbusters. The movie digs into what really brings down an empire, not just the battles, but the rot underneath. It's flawed, but undeniably bold. For anyone curious about Hollywood at its most daring, The Fall of the Roman Empire is worth a look. That's the list. 10 flops that deserve another look. If you love movie deep dives, subscribe to VintageVerse and share your own overlooked favorites in the comments. Thanks for watching.